Welcome to the June 11th edition of the PFF Forecast. It is a beautiful Sunday afternoon. We're going to dive in. We're a week away from the U.S. Open. It'll be ending at around this time next week. So we're going to jump into some U.S. Open bets. It's going to be a lot of fun. And of course, we've got some NFL stuff on deck as well. Bunch of new rushing props now on DraftKings. We're going to hit those pretty hard. Running the ball does matter in this podcast. And then we're going to talk about the NBA Finals right at the end. Game 5 is on Monday coming up. We'll decide whether this is as one-sided as the Zion Williamson social media exchange. Let's roll. We've been dissecting deeply. We've got salary cap specialist Brad Spielberger on to talk about whether $107,000 per month is overpaying or not. Brad, what is your take?
I mean, that's like a practice squad salary for the season we're talking. You're getting that on a 12 months out of the year. I mean, just in New Orleans, that I can tell you from experience, if you made that move to New Orleans, that $107,000 a month would have ran you pretty far in the lovely city of New Orleans.
Yeah, you're doing all right. More salary cap wizardry from New Orleans sports teams. If you don't know what we're talking about, that's probably for the best. If you do, you're probably laughing a little bit. Welcome to the forecast. For those of you that are new, we appreciate you. For those of you that are long-time members of the Printing Press, it is always good to have you here. If you have not joined the Printing Press Discord, highly recommend that you do. During the off season, we bet a ton of different stuff. We talk about it on the podcast, but really that's the best place to see what everyone in the community is betting on, get some good advice. Brad, Judah, obviously all three of us are in there. Ben Brown is dropping WNBA manifestos in there on a daily basis. It is fantastic. I highly recommend that if you are going to a baseball game, you join the Discord and you just at Judah and say, hey, I'm going to this baseball game and please give me a bet. This happened to me last week. Those of you that have been with this podcast know that I think baseball is just a real labor of love. It's very hard to get through. And I was going to a game. I was going to Reds Dodgers in the lovely city of Cincinnati. I hit Judah up. I said, Judah, I'm going to this game. Give me a reason to watch. My guy fires over a 6-1 same game parlay. Of course, I don't show up on time. I show up in the top of the third, just in time to see the parlay hit. Just in time. The parlay hit. It was the first thing I watched I think it was JD Martinez hit a double to pick up both of the bases that I needed to close out that parlay. So Judah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you didn't even tell me that you missed the best part of the game, which is, watching in the first inning as our first two legs cashed, and then
yes,
just walked in. I didn't hear that part of the story.
I was eating dinner at an establishment I will not name because it was Mexican food that does not deserve to be called Mexican food. Not surprising. But going absolutely insane as the Dodgers players hit. I mean, they were just pelting Williamson. I forget who it was that was pitching. And I'm the only guy in the bar cheering for these random Dodgers hitters. That's the beauty. That is the beauty of betting. You go in, you're a fan. I'm a fan of 0 players in this game. All of a sudden, a diehard fan of Will Smith. Who knew? And by the way, people that are new here, the big bet that we have, we're baseball bettors, as you know. The big bet that we have, 300-1, the Chicago White Sox to win the World Series. I took all of the winnings, Judah, and I piled it on to White Sox to win the World Series.
So we're both going to be able to pay for the Printing Press, Cabo boat. I like it.
Yes. Okay, let's get into a little NFL stuff. So we've been kind of tackling the different players' futures markets. I think this is a fun conversation. We'll try to keep it light and roll through here. We don't, allocate a huge amount of our bankroll to futures bets, but when there is a particularly juicy one, we'd like to try and get the Printing Press exposed to it. DraftKings Sportsbook, they have a pretty robust amount of futures. They now have a lot more rushing and receiving yardage totals for players this season. So we're going to hit those. We're going to start with rushing yards. We'll do receiving yards next week. But we want to give rushing the due that it deserves. A lot of talk out there with the Dalvin Cook thing on social media about the value of running backs, people ranting and raving about how this man is rushing for over 1,000 yards and no one wants to pay him anything. We've got a whole debate on rushing yards over expected that is raging. Remember the printing press, Tej Seth, who has really done a great job of popularizing rushing yards over expected and built a model using PFF data that you can find on his Twitter handle. People who are not a fan of rushing yards over expected. Before we jump in to the props, I just want to get your guys' take. Brad, I'll start with you. Maybe a little bit on the Dalvin Cook thing, but also on the rushing yards over expected stuff.
Yeah, quickly to the Dalvin Cook thing. I think that we've seen an obvious decline in his production on a snap-by-snap basis. He does break off some big gains still. I do think it's interesting if we find out he's been dealing with the separated shoulder. Eric, another obviously former member of the forecast, talking about how he thinks his biggest issue right now is just avoiding contact and not playing through contact. And maybe that changes after the surgery he got. As for rushing yards over expected, look, I do think I think a lot of the critiques that people pointed out are all things that do feed into the model. The biggest one you always hear about, it doesn't account for the blocking. Yes, it does. Or it doesn't account for, X factor, Y factor, Z factor. Look, I'm not saying it's perfect. It certainly is not. It probably tries to take into consideration anything you see people on Twitter saying it does not take into consideration.
Yeah.
Playing through contact. Staying on the field, similar issue that Zion is having. Judah, what about you?
Yeah, no, I think Brad's right. What's also kind of bothersome about the point is no one's saying that rushing yards over expected is the be all end all metric. And this is a common thread, which is you post something which is supposed to kind of capture one data point. And it's this thing is supposed to measure all running back quality play, or say something about a quarterback's decision making. Let's say something I did last summer, and it's this is the be all end all metric quarterback play. No one's saying that. Football is an extremely complex game. There are 22 people on the field interacting with each other at the same time. None of us really know how to kind of parse out those interactions, and this kind of gets us a little bit closer. And there's a sort of gradualism that I think rushing yards over expected captures, which gets us a little bit closer to understanding running back play. And no one's saying we're there, and we can kind of understand 100% of the variance, and that's said very upfront.
I think that's well put. Not to belabor the point here, but I think of another easy metric to look at that captures, I think does a better job than rushing yards over expected of just quantifying how well the runner is doing their job is rushing grade. Again, PFF rushing grade strips out the job of the running back. So it's not going to give the running back overdue credit for how the offensive line is blocking, right? We know that if you, this is one of the first things I did at PFF, was if you try to predict rushing yards on a per play basis, you can create a model that has a bunch of different variables, a bunch of different features. It should surprise absolutely no one that how good your running back is the seventh most valuable variable in that model. How good your offensive line plays, how good your offense is overall, how good your quarterback is incredibly predictive, and more predictive actually than how good the running back is. So just to give some context there, Dalvin Cook's rushing grade, PFF rushing grade, 2020 was 89.8. In 2021 was 67.1, and in 2022, 72.4. So I think at this point, you're probably getting running back that is much closer to average than elite. He has gained over 1,000 yards each of the last 3 seasons, which everyone wants to talk about ad nauseum. But I think looking a little deeper than that is important. As for rushing yards over expected, I think the biggest issue is that you're really attributing basically an error term. I don't love it as a way for quantifying the running back's contribution. I think a better way to kind of think about it is actually the heuristic that I just talked about, which is if you are trying to predict the outcome of a running play, what's the variable importance of the running back's contribution to that model? I think it's actually the more nuanced and mathematically appropriate way to look at that. And some people have talked about it. Either way, when you look at a metric like that, looking at how it correlates year to year, how predictive it is, can be an eye inside of the value of it. And to Judah's point, it says something, but doesn't say a lot about how a running back is going to do it in future years. So it's a part of the picture, certainly not the whole thing. But I did see something out there that said Dalvin Cook is not accepting any of these $5 million a year contracts. He wants a big contract. the team that pays Dalvin Cook a lot of money will be an interesting case study for how they do going forward. I can't imagine. I mean, Brad, what do you think his contract ends up being?
Yeah, that quote I saw as well, and I mean, good luck to him, because that just is the market at this position right now, especially if you're going to get hit the market in mid-June. I thought the Denver quote that got out there made a ton of sense for a couple of reasons. A, they're spending kind of willy-nilly, adding a lot of talent, trying to be relevant this year. Added Frank Clark this past week. George Payton, the GM, was in Minnesota for probably the first 4 or 5 years of Dalvin Cook's career. So there are plenty of connections there. And of course, lastly, Javonte Williams coming back from a brutal knee injury. Sean Payton's tried to say he's going to be ready by week 1. I couldn't be buying that less if I tried. So I think they make sense. And then it comes out today, Denver's probably not going to be in the market, probably not interested. To me, it's like, okay, so it's Miami. Even Buffalo, like you sign Leonard Floyd, you extend Ed Oliver. I know James Cook is brothers, but like they're now second in cash spending in the NFL, I believe. Like, are they going to spend a good amount of money on running back? Like, I don't really see it. So I just wonder if Denver is truly out. I don't know who else besides Miami is in.
Isn't the bet almost that Cook's making is that like someone's going to get hurt in training camp, and he's going to try and take advantage? Like, that's got to be his bet. If he's saying, like, I'm going to hold out, I have enough money from my current contract with the Vikings. Like, I'm going to bet that's because someone is going to get hurt. That's going to happen inevitably, like before week 1 or even early in the season. I think that's got to be his bet.
I would assume he wants to sign before week 1. Go ahead, George.
I was going to say, can you confirm, Brad, that Miami is actually interested?
I think they are. I mean, I can't confirm it personally, but I would be surprised if they're not at least having conversations. But again, they're not going to pay more than they need to. They're also top 5 in cash spending, and they're not about to pay a bunch of money if there aren't other suitors keeping him out of their, he's posted them twice on social media. He's from South Florida. It makes a lot of sense, but they're not going to be like, okay, well, no one else wants, like, we're going to pay you 1 year, $5 million. Like,
Yeah. This, not to get back to something that we started the podcast over, but this seems like there's an uneven amount of desire on each side, where one member of the equation is a little more invested than the other. And that happens to be Dalvin Cook. Like, it makes a ton of sense for him. I get that. You're from South Florida. You want to go to Miami, really good team. Yeah. From Miami's standpoint, to me, it makes absolutely zero sense. You invested in running back in the draft. You have a couple of running backs already. You have an offensive scheme that has proven time and time again that it will take fast running backs without this first round pedigree and turn them into really dynamic running backs. So it really, I got to be honest with you, feels to me like a prayer, kind of just lobbing one up, hoping that the Dolphins will ask him to go to the dance, as opposed to having a real kind of impetus there. But anyways, let's get on to players that actually do have rushing yardage props posted. Dalvin Cook obviously does not, because we don't know what team he is on, but there is a very robust group here. Again, we're looking at DraftKings for these lines. Let's start with you, Judah. Give us the first one on your mind.
Yeah, I got Cam Akers under 750.5 rushing yards. I mean, just start with like the expectation here. This is going to be a bad offense, I think. And as you said numerous times, a pretty bad O-line. But I think really what this is about is, especially when we're betting props here, value matters a lot. And we have no idea who's going to be playing running back for the Rams in week 6 or week 7. Like, if anything, Sean McVay has like changed who he wants to be his so-called bell cow running back like 7 times over the course of a season. Like, Darrell Henderson started the year last year. Cam Akers was like totally in the doghouse. He's going to get cut. Then all of a sudden, he was like the full-blown starter from like weeks 13 through 15 or whatever it was. I just don't see that he's going to have the consistent playing time to reach 750 yards in a bad offense. Like, Kyren Williams is going to get some runs. Some random guy's going to pop up in week 7 or 8 who's going to be getting 70% of the snaps. I don't see it for Cam Akers.
Cam Akers.
Yeah.
I'll be stunned if he goes over that. Brad?
Yeah, so I have an under start as well. It is Brian Robinson with the Washington Commanders, under 825.5. The feel-good story, great story. I think is a good early down runner. Does show up well in metrics like rushing yards over expected, or at least did last year on a relatively, small sample size when you want to at least make some sort of extrapolation from that data, which, not to go back to that discussion, but it's one data point. It's an important one. But nevertheless, you now have him, Antonio Gibson, and the rookie Chris Rodriguez from Kentucky, who apparently Eric Bieniemy is extremely high on. That are the reports that are coming out. I think a sixth round pick out of Kentucky. I remember watching him multiple years, in the SEC East. He is an early down bruiser, going to get those yards after contact, going to just be a very straightforward, get you 5 yards in a cloud of dust type guy. And then you have Sam Howell, right? So you have, an offense that is probably going to have a lot of short drives, probably not stay on the field very long, probably not build a lot of leads that you're then bleeding late in games by running the football out of it. Yes, the defense is good, so maybe they think they can kind of run and be in games, but realistically, more so, we could expect some late game throwing to get it back into games, or throwing to, get out of a tie or take a lead, whatever. Anyway, I just think it's too much I think there's going to be a legitimate three back committee. And Robinson, again, like him, he's fine, but I don't think he's going to get over 825 rushing yards next year.
As well, I felt a little guilty here. I have a couple of overs that I like, and I feel a little dirty saying that, but we'll see what you guys think about them. The first one that I like is Najee Harris, 975.5. So the idea behind, I think, Brad, you've mentioned this a couple of times, that he, was going through a pretty significant injury, overcoming a pretty significant injury last year. The other thing was that they had just this kind of quagmire at quarterback for a while. Did not eclipse 75 rushing yards before week 10. From week 10 onward, however, he went over 75 rushing yards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of his last 8 games. And that with Kenny Pickett kind of getting in the groove of things, if you will call it that. So seemed to pick it up towards the end of the year. His rushing grade backs that up as well. Had his 4 highest graded games after week 10. Then we'll have an entire offseason to get back healthy. A guy that I think will have a lot of desire to kind of regain what was a rookie season where everyone loved him, and then everyone couldn't stand him in 2022. So I think a little bounce back year from him. He's gone over 1,000 yards each of his past 2 seasons. I think this is more baking in some of the pre-week 10 Harris that we saw. I think he probably got a lot more of the post-week 10 coming his way. So over on Najee Harris. Judah, what's your
this is officially a Najee Harris podcast.
Yeah, I was going to say,
after all the flack we've taken, especially you, George, in particular, taking a lot of flack for being anti-Steelers. We are a Najee Harris podcast at the PFF Forecast in 2023.
Love it.
I'm excited to be back. Well, welcome me back, Steelers fans. Open up.
It's beautiful. Yeah, I'll go with another over here. It's Isaiah Pacheco over 775.5. He had 830 yards last year rushing. He didn't earn his role until midway through the season. I expect him to kind of have that starting role that he had towards the end of the season in the playoffs. He succeeded in that role, and 775, not a huge number for a guy that should be on a team that is winning lots of games late. Yes, the Chiefs throw the ball a ton. Isaiah Pacheco was effective last year. I don't see why that would not continue in his second year with the full-time role.
Yeah, we're banking that he's not as bad as Clyde Edwards-Helaire. First-round pick, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the missing piece for the Kansas Chiefs. Missing piece was actually drafting him first and then not playing him. That was what allowed them to win the Super Bowl. Brad, what's your second bet?
Yeah, that was the key. Deneric Prince is the undrafted guy in Kansas City everyone's buzzing about, but I like the Pacheco bet a lot as well. So I also have an over. Look, Aaron Jones is kind of the opposite of Dalvin Cook. He was scheduled to make $16 million this year in Green Bay. Obviously, no team is going to be giving $16 million in cash to a running back, probably in the near future. And they chopped off $5 million, but still kept him at a very legitimate, respectable value of $11 million in cash. He stayed by the team. He's talking about how good Jordan Love is, how they're not rebuilding, he is Mr. Green Bay right now. And look, AJ Dillon's there in a contract year. Is always going to vulture some short yardage work. When you take a fullback in the second round like AJ Dillon, you got to give him some carries, some fullback dives, near the goal line and on third downs. But over 800.5 rushing yards for Aaron Jones. Look, is this offense going to be as efficient? Is he going to get as many light boxes, all those things, as they did with Aaron Rodgers? No, but they are always going to be a run-first team with Matt LaFleur, and obviously now with Jordan Love might even be more of a run-first football team. And I just think he's going to get fed. I think he really is going to get a ton of opportunity. The carries will be there, and it still is a good offensive line. You're probably now getting a healthier Bakhtiari, a healthier Elgton Jenkins. They've added some more pieces. I like this number a lot for Aaron Jones here.
Yeah, I was actually looking at the so Aaron Jones is at 800.5, which is what you said.
Yep.
And Jay Dillon, I believe, is 775.5.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. I think you're betting on some uncertainty with some of the quarterback situations. I think is an opportunity here to get a little bit of an edge. So I do kind of like that one. I would say Aaron Jones provides a lot more as a receiver. And if you're trying to make Jordan Love look decent, I think you probably want Aaron Jones on the field a little bit more. That's just kind of my take. I'll go to an under here to spice things up a little bit. This is just kind of a fade of an offense, a new offense with a new quarterback, and that is Tampa Bay. Rachaad White is 650.5. So Rachaad White was not very good last year with Tom Brady at quarterback. Their offensive line is a complete and utter nightmare. It was a nightmare last year. It's going to be a nightmare with Baker Mayfield in the backfield. I don't have any faith in their scheme whatsoever. I don't think we've seen any evidence that Rachaad White is going to be some particularly, durable guy. They've got Keyshawn Vaughn and Chase Edmonds. I think both of them are just as good as Rachaad White. So I don't even know if he's like playing a lot, by the time that the season gets going. I think there's going to be a very short leash for someone like him. But you look at that offensive line, it is so absolutely terrible. Other than Tristan Wirfs, all of these guys are either ungradable because they haven't played enough, have a sub 30 PFF grade or a sub 50 PFF grade. So it is really kind of a nightmare there. I think they're going to be behind, so they're going to be throwing a lot. So he's probably not going to get as much usage, even if he were to be a bell cow there. So I like just kind of fading Rachaad White completely in Tampa Bay. Judah, what's your next one?
Let's go with James Conner under 750 yards. Conner's had one of the highest snap shares when healthy of any running back this year. He's like 28. Next year, I don't expect that to continue. Not to mention, I think this might be the worst offense in football. And like he barely squeaked by this number last year with Kyler Murray playing half these games with an already high snap share. I think if you kind of build in some inevitable, other guys just coming in, and the fact that this offense is just awful, they're not going to be competing in very many games. I don't really see how he gets to 750. I don't even think he'll be the starting running back by week 10.
That's the thing. It's like with running backs, there's so much. I mean, half these guys, maybe more than half, maybe like 80% could just not be starters within 3 weeks of the NFL season. Yeah. Brad?
Yeah, I don't really have an official play left, and far be it for me to take another like 28-plus-year-old running backs over, especially with what you just said. I do think it's just interesting for Joe Mixon, and I think part of the bet here, or part of the line here, I should say, is baked in some of the uncertainty of like, is Cincinnati going to stand by him? He's got legal stuff going on and all that. It's 825.5. They lose Samaje Perine to the Denver Broncos. Yes, they draft Chase Brown in the 5th round, who's a good player and was kind of an effective early down rusher at Illinois, can catch the ball a little bit as well. I'm not saying I'm not betting it, but it's an interesting line because the narrative, I think, has kind of flipped back to like Mixon's our guy. He's our number one back. He's going to be here for the season, yada, yada. And I think this offensive line has improved. And I think obviously we know with this team, they are going to have some leads to protect and some games to bleed out. So it's not a bet. I don't like it as much as the first two, but if you do like it, I don't hate it.
So I think I was looking at that one. I was going to ask you, Brad, is the thought that he's going to be legally allowed to play?
See, what he did, I don't think is going to be in the suspension realm. I think it was more a question of like people wondering, are the Bengals going to like cut him or just not want to deal with it anymore? I don't get from what I've read and everything I've read about the case, it seems like a simple civil, out of like it's not Alvin Kamara level the way I interpret it.
Okay. Yeah, because I would say from a usage, to your point earlier, Judah, like a guy that will get usage if he's on the field is Joe Mixon. They love nothing more. Handing that ball off to Joe Mixon and keeping Joe Burrow from taking a hit. I have one more. The most underrated rushing quarterback in the NFL, I think, is Daniel Jones. He's at 575 and a half, had 805 yards last year. They've now given him this big contract. So you think about what that means. Okay, he's going to have to try and prove that he's worth $40 million. As a passer, it's going to be kind of tough. 84 and a half PFF rushing grade last year, as I mentioned, 805 yards, half of those coming after contact. I think is an underrated runner. Now, 65 of his 144 attempts were scrambles. They're going to run the ball to him in a design fashion. I think they need to do that even more to give him more kind of advantageous looks as a thrower. So I think he kind of sails by this coming season, pending he stays healthy, and I see no reason why he shouldn't. So that's my last one. Judah, any more from you?
Yeah, I got one more. We're really sensing a theme here of taking the unders on offenses. I'm very bearish on, which goes to really tie in our conversation about rushing yards over expected. But you got Miles Sanders under 925 yards. I don't think the Panthers are going to have a good offense at all this year. It's rookie quarterback. They don't really have many weapons. I don't see them leading often in games. Miles Sanders, as it were, never really took a huge role for the Eagles. Like, they really split carries with, Boston Scott and Kenneth Gainwell. He's not really a burner type guy. The Panthers, I mean, it's a different regime, but they use Chuba Hubbard. They're going to, I imagine one of these undrafted free agents is going to kind of make his way into the rotation. Sanders is not a full-time player, I don't think. And I'm not really bullish on this offense. He gets hurt, 2-3 games. There's no prayer that he has 925 rushing yards.
Yeah, I saw that one as well. And it's like, that feels a little rich to me for the Carolina Panthers, although in Frank Reich, I trust. Before we get on to the US Open, quick reminder, you can get PFF Plus subscription 25% off right now. Promo code FORECAST, FRECAST. Now is a good time to buy because it'll take you through the entire year. That's through fantasy season, betting season, draft season. So get access to all of PFF's fantasy tools. There are a couple new ones that are coming your way this season. I promise you it'll feel like an absolute deal by the time fantasy season rolls around, about a month from now. So grab that little promo now. Then, of course, betting, and then into the NFL draft, the NFL mock draft simulator, and through free agency, where there's no one that does better than Brad Spielberger. And of course, during betting season, Judah Fortgang puts out a little piece about same game parlays you may or may not want to get invested in. So go get that PFF Plus subscription, PFF.com, or on the PFF app. Promo code FORECAST gives you 25% off. All right, US Open. It is being played at Los Angeles Country Club, the North Course. As you would expect, there are videos of people dropping golf balls into the rough and then them promptly disappearing. There are par threes that are 300 yards. This is the hardest set of par threes that you will find on the PGA Tour. It is shaping up to be a pretty nice weather weekend in Southern California next weekend, so it should be a fantastic time. Brad, have you begun the research process, you and your Data Golf subscription? Shout out Data Golf.
Have I begun? Yeah, shout out Data Golf. Also want to shout out Bet Spurts. They actually through the forecast pod. I have it, but I should share it. A quick, short, free tutorial to check out their tools and their data as well. And they have some awesome golf stuff as well. So this is using Data Golf and Bet Spurts and what they have to offer with their golf package. Thanks to both groups for always helping us bless the people with some winners here. So have I dove in? Of course I've dove in. We're deep into the US Open here. I would first say
deep as the rough.
As deep as the rough at LA Country Club. I would actually want to first point out though, George, if you are a Bet Max Homa and you didn't hear George tell you that 6 months ago, you're too late. No one was earlier. I think George bet Max Homa on an unofficial book because it wasn't even listed when he wanted to place that bet.
That was Super Bowl weekend. And I was the only person that even knew the U.S. Open was being played at LA Country Club. But I will shout out, I won't name him by name, but a member of the printing press who I met in person in Phoenix at the Super Bowl told me of that. So if you think the community is not strong, it is very strong. Holds not just the course record at LA Country Club. He's from LA, from Southern California. But also apparently has the three lowest scores overall at the course. So this is something that he has dominated and played really well at. He is now 30-1. I got him at, I want to say 40, 45, point where he was like 33 to 1 for a little while. But 30, I will say, is not bad given that data point, right? Like you look at the guys at the top, obviously Scheffler, outright winner favorite at 7-1, John Rahm 9-1, which makes sense. I don't understand how these books keep putting Rory as like a top 5 player in these events. Like this is just like banana land. The dude is a complete disaster. Even if he plays well to start, like he did in Canada, he just completely melts as it gets down the stretch. He's 11-1, Koepka also 11-1. So you look at that kind of like top grouping, Cantlay 14-1, Hovland 16-1. Not a ton of strength there. I feel like this is a pretty wide open event. And so to get the guy that has the 3 lowest scores on that course all time at 30-1, I feel like it's still a good value, Brad.
So to address 2 points there. So first, the McIlroy point. I've now started betting his top 5s and top 10s, but not his number 1s. Even better point, if he starts off slow, but he still makes the cut, do a live top 5 or live top 10, which I found at both Caesars and DraftKings, and he'll, because there's no pressure, he'll shoot a 62 on Sunday and finish T4th because there's no, he's not actually going to win.
No
so
pressure.
Yeah, that's how you bet Rory McIlroy right now. But also, I'm glad you mentioned. I don't like a lot of the favorites either. So my 3 big bets for who I like to win. And real quick, the thesis here, you mentioned, look, there are thick roughs. It's Bermuda grass, which apparently is even harder to play out of the rough. I've mentioned recently, Data Golf now has a particular tool for approach shots out of the rough, in particular from both 150 yards and under and over 150 yards. Also, I promise we're not chasing guys that we bet recently that haven't come through for us, but we were on the Victor Hovland train. He finally won. We were on the Corey Connors train. He was top 5 this week. All these things. A guy that I've liked a bunch. I'm not even sure if I've given him out yet, maybe in matchups, but who had the funniest weekend at the Canadian Open, went par 8 under, par 8 under. That's Tyrrell Hatton, finished in second place with the funniest 4 scores I've ever seen, but playing very, very good golf the last 3 months or so. And in particular is phenomenal playing out of rough. So he's a fiery guy. He's fun to watch as well. He's a maniac. He'll probably throw a club, probably break one over his knee at some point. You'll enjoy the entire experience for all 4 days. But he's awesome. Very, very good player. So it's partly you want to look at approachability and out of the rough. You want to be good off the tee. You don't have to be a bomber. It is a long course, but a lot of slanted fairways that are going to roll. You just want to be accurate. It's very wide fairways, so just get the ball in play, let it run. The first one is Tyrrell Hatton, and he is at 40-1. I like that one a lot. So second play, Jordan Spieth has been flirting a lot with wins. And look, I never bet Jordan Spieth. I think he always has a bad price, and I think we're finally getting a pretty solid price on Jordan Spieth here. So his driver has never been a strength of his. He's a phenomenal short game player, maybe the best bunker player in the world or one of them. If he has a lot of those chips and stuff around the George, the video you mentioned, the guy dropping the ball in the rough was right around the green. You couldn't even see the thing. We've seen Jordan Spieth chip those in once a weekend. That's his game. The last 2 months, his driver's been phenomenal. It's been accurate and it's been long enough to where he's in a position to attack par 5s and 2 to get close to pins, on par 4s. I think we're now getting a good price at 25-1 because his driver is doing well enough and he's playing some very good golf. I like him a lot at 25-1 here. Honestly, not a very good U.S. Open player, but I like the price. I thought he was going to be about 15-1. Instead, he's 25. The last one. The biggest favorite is Xander Schauffele, who is 18-1. His game's just great for this as well. He's top 20, I think, in both the under 150 and over 150 approach strokes gained out of the rough. Again, not a bomber off the tee, but gets the ball in play, is accurate, and then also has a great short game, can manage a lot of those chips and things around the greens. He's a guy that I think also look, you're going to make bogeys. You're going to make double bogeys this weekend. It's going to happen. I think the winner is going to be at like -8 for the weekend. He's always a guy that does that and then bounces back with some birdie runs and doesn't lose his composure. So those are the three guys I like to win the tournament this weekend.
I like those. Are you betting those as winners, top 5 and top 10? How do you generally allocate?
I do usually sprinkle a little bit of both. In terms of a total bankroll perspective, I also leave, I would say, probably about a quarter of my bankroll for the weekend for live bets, as we talked about a bunch. We love a lot live golf, live betting here. I probably would say, even though obviously, so for example, Schauffele is 18-1 to win, 4-1 top 5, 2-1 top 10. Even though the odds are drastically different, I generally do kind of a similar allocation for each bet. But I will kind of start to, as I get to the longer shots, I'll probably shift a little bit more, into the top 5, top 10s. When I get into the 50+1 to win, I'll put more in the top 5 and top 10 bucket.
Yeah, it's a good point. So Terrell Hatton, I was watching I love watching the tournament before a major and looking at guys that don't win but play well. Terrell Hatton, great example of that. The dude is a great ball striker. And the guys that I'm betting on, that I've already bet on, all have this similar characteristic, great ball striker, and then looking for players that can put it in the fairway. And if they're going to end up not hitting the green, can manage, their way out of that rough, as you talked about speed. But Hatton, great example, 40-1 to win, plus 750 top 5, 3-1, a little better than 3-1 to top 10. A guy who doesn't have to have his name mentioned once, right? For him to squeak into the top 10, right? Guy like kind of you mentioned with Rory can go really low, and can get their way into the top 10 with a really good Sunday round. So I tend to be similar to you. I'll go a unit kind of on each of those. And if it's someone that's a really big long shot, sometimes I'll go half a unit to win, full unit on top 10 and top 5. So here are the guys that I like. I mentioned Home. I still think he's a value at 30-1 to win, 6-1 top 5, and 3-1 to top 10. But I'm going with some longer shots. You mentioned Hatton. I love him. Two guys that are 45 and 50-1. Bryson DeChambeau, 45-1, plus 850 to top 5 and plus 360 to top 10. His game has really, I think, mellowed out. And he was right there with Brooks at the PGA. I really like the way that he's striking the ball on the par 3. So these are really long par 3s. I think this is why I like Brooks the most. He is going to be able to hit irons into these par 3s with a height to them that other players will not. I think it's a real opportunity for him to play particularly well by dominating those par 3s. I'm worried about him hitting fairways. That'd be my biggest worry. But if he can he's cooled out a little bit. If he can just hit some fairways, I think he's got a really good chance to compete. Tommy Fleetwood, 50-1. I was telling Brad before this, I was rooting for him not to win. He was in a playoff to win the tournament, the RBC Canadian Open today. I was hoping that he would not win so that his odds would not get inflated. He did not win, but he was a guy, you watch this on 18, he kept hitting iron off the tee. He's a really good ball striker, and he's in these positions a lot. And so I don't think he's going to have some sort of meltdown if he's in contention come Sunday. Really solid ball striker, will have the discipline, I think, to keep it in the fairway. And then a guy who's, so he is 50-1 to win, 9-1 top 5, 4-1 top 10. Guy with the exact same profile in terms of his odds, but a very different player. Not short by any means, but is a wizard around the green, is Shane Lowry. I feel like this is the guy that I'd bet on just about every single major because of his short game and because the dude is just unflappable. Like he goes out and performs. He kind of the anti-Rory McIlroy there, despite being from a similar part of the universe. So big fan of all three of those guys. I actually like the fact that they're 45, 50, and 50-1. I feel like that is a ridiculous, a good opportunity. I could legitimately see one of them winning. And that's kind of what you're looking for in these tournaments. So I'm excited. I'm going to dive into data golf, Brad, a little bit more this week. We'll identify some more some matchups for round 1. But I'm with you as well. Like the live betting with golf is just such an awesome opportunity. I feel like Judah during golf events because I'm able to bet live and actually know what I'm doing.
And that's it. I'm glad you mentioned that because a great point. I brought it up last podcast about golf. The front nine at this course is much more difficult than the back nine. I haven't checked actually how they're launching off, but I assume kind of like the most recent tournaments, it'll be, half the guys tee off on 10, half the guys tee off on 1. If a guy is a couple below par early playing the front nine, it is more meaningful than if a guy is a couple strokes below par on the back nine. So keep an eye on things like that. The little asterisks on the scoreboard, if you're not a big golf guy, that's what that means. On the leaderboard early on, if you're watching coverage, the asterisk means they teed off on 10 was their first hole. So yeah, so that is a perfect example. Also, when you do dive into data golf, Bryson DeChambeau is number 2 in strokes gained on iron shots over 200 yards. So you nailed that identification there of the par threes. That's been his game so far this year.
Shooter, you got all that?
Yeah, no, it's all down there. Look, it's a process, getting into golf betting, and it starts with like touching grass itself. I've been out on the course all week. I was hitting the driving range. I hit it today. I hit it Friday. I got to get prepared first, on the actual grass itself. Then we can kind of dive into the data, and we can have some bets for this weekend.
There you go. Touching grass. I love spoken like a true baseball player. Okay, let's briefly talk about finals game 5. This is like, you go back as long as you want to all these, it feels like something's over. So this certainly feels like it's over. It's 3-1. Draymond Green on his podcast said it was over already, which I'm sure they're playing in the Heat locker room. It feels so over, Brad. It's 9 is the spread in Denver for game 5. You wouldn't expect Miami to just lay down. I think they come out and play hard, but it feels like they are just so overmatched at this point from a talent perspective. And they don't have anyone that's kind of showing up and just going bananas like Caleb Martin did in the last round. So what are your thoughts on game 5?
Yeah, I mean, Murray and Jokic didn't even play well in game 4, and they won fairly comfortably. I hope folks listen to my rants about the unders. They're 3-1 in the series. The 3 of them hit by 20 points each. It finally got adjusted, I think, in game 5. It's at 208.5, which I still think I'm not going to bet it because it's about a 10-point correction from the first 4 games, but is now more in line with what it should be. I honestly think Denver wins and covers. I think the series is very, very over. Maybe I'm overreacting, but I'm going to look more into some player props, some exotic stuff like that. Like I don't know. I think Miami, every time we count them out, they come back and win. But I think your plays are betting, in particular, I do like Jokic over points for the same narrative you gave out. I think Miami's going to try to make him a scorer again and see if that can be their last saving grace. And I think he drops like a 35-pluser in game 5.
Yeah, that's been the consistent bet that I've had. I've been betting Jokic over, and then also some of the alternate point spreads. I bet him over 40 a couple times. I feel like I should hit that bet at some point here because the game play, I guess, has sort of gone away from him. And then Aaron Gordon had this obscene performance in the last game. I'm not sure that's gonna continue. His total is now up to 29.5. It's been 27.5, I think, for most of the series. I'm kind of with you. I think I'm gonna hold with the Jokic plays in terms of where I go. I don't know. I don't have a really good sense for Miami. Maybe that's a good reason to bet Denver. And maybe I'll come up with something by the time game tips. So go check out the Discord and see what everyone else is doing. But I'm kind of ready for this series to be over so we can talk golf and we can get the Ja Morant suspension. I feel like that's what everyone wants. No one really cares about this. Like they're like, okay, we know Denver's going to win. Like, let's get this over with so we can see if Ja Morant's going to play basketball for the Grizzlies again. If we could bet on that, I would love to bet on that. What would you put? Actually, that's a good question. What would you put the over under on Ja Morant games missed?
I'm going to do 41.5 or 41 flat, right at the midpoint of the season.
Wow. I'll go under. I think that's an absurd amount of games to pull a guy out. I mean, that is ridiculous. I think 20. I think Adam Silver. I'm getting inside Adam Silver's head for a second. I think he wanted people to go, oh, it's going to be big, right? Get people to talk about it a little bit during the finals, and then come out with something after the finals that is actually not as extreme, so that it's not that big of a story. I think he wants people to stop talking about this. I think it'll be hefty. I'm going to say it's like 30 games, 25, 30 games. So I'll take the under there. That was our podcast. If you want some baseball bets, remember, go to the Printing Press Discord, hit our guy Judah up. It will pay off. I promise you that. We'll be back on Wednesday afternoon. We'll talk a little more US Open for sure. So hang out with us. We appreciate you all. Love you. Peace.